Have you ever wondered why your heart races before a big presentation? Why your palms sweat when you're about to make a big decision? Or why, deep inside, there's that strange tension when you step into something unknown? That's fear, a word so small yet powerful enough to shape who we are. Fear isn't just a feeling, it's one of the oldest companions of humankind. From the very beginning, when our ancestors heard rustling in the bushes and sensed danger long before they saw it, fear was there. It wasn't their enemy, it was their teacher, their silent guide for survival. Without fear, humans might not have lasted this long. But here's the interesting part. Today, most of us aren't running from wild beasts or hiding in dark caves. We live in cities, surrounded by security systems, predictable routines, and fluorescent lights. Yet, fear hasn't gone away. It's evolved. Now, instead of lions, we fear job loss. Instead of lightning, we fear rejection. Somewhere along the way, fear shifted from protecting us to quietly controlling us. What if I told you that fear still holds purpose? A deep biological one. Inside your brain sits a small almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. This is your personal alarm system, lightning fast in detecting threats and firing off the fight, flight, or freeze response. But here's the catch. The amygdala doesn't know whether the threat is a burning building or just an awkward conversation. It reacts the same way. And that's where the real story begins. Because in our modern lives, fear often misfires. It triggers over little things, things that don't actually threaten us, but still paralyze our decisions. That's why millions of people live stuck in what-if loops, like, what if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I'm not good enough? The danger isn't outside anymore. It's inside. But imagine, just for a moment, if fear could be turned around. What if instead of silencing us, it could speak to us? What if instead of stopping us, it could guide us toward what matters most? Because deep down, fear doesn't just signal danger, it also points toward growth. The things we fear often hide the things we care about most. This journey, this research, is about exactly that. It's about understanding the roots of fear, decoding how it's wired into our bodies and minds, and exploring how it shapes our choices every single day. More importantly, it's about learning to reframe fear, not as an enemy, but as an advisor, a messenger, a force that can push us to evolve. So as we move through this exploration, keep this question in mind. What if mastering fear isn't about becoming fearless, but about learning to listen to what fear is really trying to say? Because once we understand fear, truly understand it, we stop letting it dictate our life. We begin to use it to grow stronger, wiser, and more alive.
Chapter 1. The Science and Experience of Fear. Have you ever felt your heart pounding even before you understood why you were scared? That split second when something feels off and your entire body reacts before your mind has even processed the situation? That's not your imagination, that's biology in action. And believe it or not, it's one of the most ancient forces keeping you alive. Fear starts deep inside your brain, in a tiny almond-shaped structure called the amygdala. Think of it as your personal fire alarm, always scanning your environment, always alert. The moment it senses danger, real or imagined, it slams that alarm button. Within milliseconds, your body floods with adrenaline. Your muscles tense, pupils dilate, heartbeats quicken, and breathing sharpens. You're suddenly alert, ready to fight, run, or freeze. All this happens long before the rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, even wakes up to ask, wait, what's actually going on? It's almost poetic, isn't it? A silent battle between two brains. One ancient, impulsive, and emotional, the other modern, logical, and analytical. Fear begins as an instinct and ends as an experience. The amygdala strikes first. The prefrontal cortex catches up later, trying to make sense of the chaos. But here's the twist. This system, designed to protect us, doesn't always get the message right. Let's say someone startles you from behind or your phone buzzes with an unknown number. Your amygdala doesn't know the difference between a predator and a push notification. It only knows that something unexpected has happened. So it does what it's meant to do. It screams, "Danger!" And sometimes that alarm doesn't switch off. For people struggling with anxiety disorders, like generalized anxiety disorder or PTSD, this alarm system gets stuck in overdrive. Imagine your smoke detector blaring day and night, not because there's fire, but because it can't tell burnt toast from a real blaze. That's what living with chronic fear feels like. Constant hyper-awareness, constant exhaustion, a body that stays ready for war, even in moments of peace. But fear isn't always the villain. At its best, it's our internal compass, that quiet voice urging us to double-check the lock, watch our step, or prepare before the exam. It's that delicate balance between survival and growth. The challenge begins when fear crosses the line from protection to paralysis. You've probably felt it before, standing before an audience, hands trembling, your mind blanking out. That's the amygdala hijacking your thoughts. It floods your system so intensely that reasoning becomes almost impossible. Your thinking brain shuts down and instinct takes over. But here's something beautiful. This very system that can paralyze you also proves how deeply wired your survival instinct is. Every fear you feel, however irrational it may seem, began with one purpose: to keep you alive. Whether it's a prehistoric response to a predator or a modern anxiety about losing control, fear is the body's way of saying, "Be alert, something important is happening." The real question, then, isn't how to eliminate fear, but how to understand it. What triggers it? How does it shape our behavior before we even realize it's happening? And more importantly, can we learn to work with fear instead of fighting it? Because once we understand that fear is not our enemy, just an overprotective guardian, we start to see it differently, less as something to resist and more as something to decode. In the next chapter, we'll uncover what happens when fear steps beyond science, when it begins to shape our thoughts, choices, and entire way of living. Because fear begins in the brain, but it doesn't end there.
Chapter 2. The historical and social impact of fear. Imagine a world millions of years ago, silent except for rustling leaves, distant roars, and the uncertain footsteps of early humans. Back then, fear was a lifesaver. It was a sharp edge that separated those who survived from those who didn't. If you could sense a lurking predator just in time, your heart racing, legs ready to flee, you lived another day. Fear, you see, is one of the most ancient gifts from evolution. It's woven deep into the fabric of life itself, handed down from the earliest animals through generations, survival stories etched into our DNA. But here's where things get intriguing. As human societies evolved, the dangers we faced began to change. The physical threats, big cats, storms, famine, slowly gave way to more complex challenges. Suddenly, the biggest risks were social, being shunned by the tribe, losing respect, or facing the uncertainty of survival in a changing world. Yet, despite this enormous shift in the nature of threats, our brain's ancient alarm system, the amygdala, didn't keep up. It still reacts as if faced with a direct life-or-death danger. That's the root of a deep mismatch between our prehistoric wiring and the realities of modern life. Now think about your day-to-day fears. An overflowing email inbox, the pressure of a social media comment that feels like judgment, the dread of speaking in public. None of these are predators waiting in the shadows, right? But your body reacts exactly the same way it would if you were staring death in the face. Heart pounds, sweat beads, vision narrows. This explains so much about why modern fear feels so intense and sometimes downright baffling. It's like your ancient brain is ringing the alarm for a fire that doesn't exist. The result? Constant anxiety, avoidance, and stress, not from real danger, but from symbolic ones. What's even more fascinating is how fear spreads.
Have you noticed how anxiety can ripple through families or teams, passing from one person to another almost like a virus? This is called social and vicarious learning. We watch how others respond to fear and we absorb it ourselves. A child who sees a parent panic during thunderstorms might grow up with a deep fear of storms. A team racked with nervousness before a presentation can amplify each other's anxiety, making the fear feel enormous and unstoppable. Fear isn't limited to private moments. It creeps into our performances, stage fright, sports jitters, the terror before a speech. It sneaks into social situations, the fear of rejection, the loneliness that follows isolation. It even haunts our quietest times, waiting anxiously in a hospital room, wrestling with existential questions late at night. And on a larger scale, fear shapes entire communities and societies. It's the invisible force behind stock market panics and public health crises. In moments of uncertainty, fear spreads, gripping people collectively, sometimes guiding decisions and sometimes leading to chaos. So why does fear play such a massive role in who we are, both as individuals and as social beings? Because fear is not just a reaction, it's also a language, a way our minds and bodies communicate about what matters most: survival, connection, and belonging. But here's the burning question for us today. How do we live in a world that triggers ancient alarms for modern problems? How do we navigate this gap without being paralyzed or overwhelmed? In the next chapter, together, we'll explore strategies and insights for transforming fear from a source of limitation into a source of strength. Because if fear can ripple through societies, maybe it can also be harnessed to lead us forward.
Chapter 3. Mastering Fear for Personal and Social Growth. Here's the truth most people miss. The goal isn't to eliminate fear. That's impossible. And honestly, it's not even desirable. Fear is not your enemy. It's your bodyguard. It's the ancient voice saying, "I want you to survive this." The real challenge isn't in killing fear, it's in transforming your relationship with it. Imagine for a moment that fear isn't a wall, but a messenger, a biological signal telling you something here matters. It's your body's way of saying, pay attention. Once you understand that, everything changes. So, how do we begin to master it? How do we stop letting fear drive the car and instead let it ride in the passenger seat? It starts with one simple but powerful act: naming it. When you feel fear rise, that lump in your throat, the knot in your stomach, the racing pulse, pause. Say to yourself, "I'm feeling fear." That might sound small, but neurologically, it's huge. Labeling the emotion activates the prefrontal cortex, the logical, rational part of your brain. It's like switching the lights on in a dark room. Suddenly, what felt overwhelming becomes something you can see, understand, and work with. The next step is breathe. Deep, deliberate, slow breaths. When you control your breath, you send a message to your nervous system, "I am safe." Your heart slows, your muscles loosen. Your mind starts to regain control. Because fear may begin in the brain, but it's the body that keeps it alive. And calming the body is how we reclaim the mind. Then comes the most transformative step: curiosity. Instead of running from fear, lean in. Ask it questions. What are you trying to protect me from? What is it that I care about so deeply that I'm afraid to lose? That single shift from judgment to curiosity changes everything. Because curiosity and fear can't coexist for long. One fuels panic, the other fuels growth. And as you start practicing this, labeling, breathing, questioning, something subtle happens. You stop being inside your fear and you start observing it. You go from victim to witness, from reactive to reflective, from being controlled by fear to being guided by it. That's mastery. It doesn't mean you'll never feel fear again. It means fear will no longer dictate the terms of your life. Now, imagine what happens when entire communities, not just individuals, begin to master fear. Society runs on emotion.
And fear has always been one of the strongest currencies. It drives headlines, elections, marketing campaigns, even economies. Politicians know it. Media outlets know it. Corporations know it. Fear sells. Fear mobilizes. Fear controls.
And hey, if this video inspired you, give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear from you.